I'm Adrienne Giffen, and this is Now You're Talking. Parenting in the digital world can feel overwhelming, especially when you're balancing a career, raising teens and preteens, and trying to keep up with it all. Screens are constant, and sometimes real connection feels out of reach. This podcast is your chance to pause and breathe, a space for stories and insights that bring encouragement, perspective, and the reminder that you are not alone. Today's conversation will resonate with so many women. I'm joined by Tiffany Lewis, a full-time entrepreneur, mother, and partner who understands the invisible weight of trying to do it all. Tiffany shares her journey from corporate life, where flexibility for working mothers was more ideal than reality, to building a marketing business grounded in meaning, honesty, and balance. We talk about ambition versus presence, the quiet burnout women normalize, and the tension that exists between working and non-working moms. This is a conversation about advocating for yourself, redefining success, and realizing that what once felt like your greatest burden can become your greatest blessing. If you've ever wondered whether you can do meaningful work and be present at home, or questioned who you are beyond your job title, this episode is for you. Let the conversations begin. Tiffany, welcome to this podcast. I'm looking forward to getting to know you better and getting to know how you're navigating the world being a full-time entrepreneur and mom and partner. How are you navigating it all?
Thank you so much for having me. This is definitely a topic that's near and dear to my heart. You know, through the successes and the trenches is one that I'm always excited to share about. I think, you know, a lot of this journey hasn't come from rainbows and butterflies. And I think there are a lot of women, especially, who are afraid to share that vulnerability online. So I'm excited to share, our conversation with transparency in hopes that we can make an impact here together.
Yeah. So what does that look like? What do you think that people need to hear about navigating these complex times?
Yeah, I think, as women, we're in a unique position in economy. Many households are dual income households, and that was the position I found myself in, is that I was climbing the corporate ladder as a divorced, honestly, got married the first time right after college, woman, and really leaning into that success and corporate ladder, not really wanting children or a family in that moment. As you can imagine, I was pretty jaded. I became an aunt to two little nieces, and I loved every minute of being an aunt. And so that kind of, opened my eyes to the possibilities of what being a working mom could look like, and explore the idea of being remarried. And so it softened a side of me that I think, the corporate world maybe has conditioned us to believe that the two can't exist well. And I think, we're in a time where we have more flexibility in work. This was like, me trying to do remote work before it was cool or trendy or socially acceptable.
Acceptable, yes. Yeah.
And so I think, we find ourselves in a position to need two incomes. And so when we become mothers, that is something that I realized I wanted after being remarried. And I actually married a guy that I went to high school with, and he was just the nicest guy. And, I wasn't open to a nice guy until I got much older and wiser. And so children came later for me. But what I realized quickly is, watching these women who many times I was in a male-dominated industry were the breadwinners in their families, and how they were navigating motherhood in corporate, and how almost unkind corporate could be in offering the flexibility that working parents in general, especially working moms, need, is really a commodity that I don't think is talked about enough.
Yes. You know what always fascinates me, and I'd be really interested to hear from your perspective, I remember when I was raising my kids, there seemed to be friction between non-working moms and working moms. Is that still a thing?
I think so. And I hate to say this because I think we've evolved past like bean girl women in corporate, but I think there's still so much of that at play. I think there's a lot of jealousy. I think there's a lot of competition. I definitely realized when I was in corporate as a working mom that I wanted to hide that. And I'm sure that was the same with you. Just like it kind of adds a layer of weakness or a perception that you don't take work as seriously because your priorities have changed. So, it wasn't that long ago for me. I'm in my 8th year of entrepreneurship and I still, have friends raising young kids. And I do think there is a layer there of discontent between women and between parents and non-parents of how much flexibility should be extended. And I think for those not having children, there's a level of flexibility that should be extended as their time is just as valuable, maybe not as an instinctive or, need of having a family, but maybe they have, nieces that they want to spend time with or pets that are really important to them. Like you don't have to be a mom to be able to enjoy your free time.
Right. Yes. And it's so interesting to me that sort of has lasted throughout the ages. And I hope that we can get that at some point, that to be mutually supportive makes us all better.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I will say, one thing that I think has set me apart in corporate, even when I was there, before I was a mom, is always had this mentality of building the longer table, not the taller fence. And so there's all this cattiness at corporate.
Yes.
And I was like, yeah, you could sit with me. Come on, we should be lifting each other up. And there was such a big desire to be a mentor. And that's not always the case. So that friction that you speak about, I think, is there. And I think going against that is actually rare in some cases in companies.
So share, what was it like as a mom in corporate and now as an entrepreneur? What are some of the differences and what are some of the similarities between what you have to do as probably the hub of it all?
Yeah,
and being a mom.
I have childcare. I've always had childcare. I've had a combination of daycare. We've had a nanny here in the home during COVID. And so I think a lot of the perception is, well, if you're working from home and you have a business, why do you need childcare? And I come back with a quippy A, my sanity.
Yes. Yeah.
And B, because we still have to have that undistracted time to think, to be at our best. And so I think, I'm still doing a lot of coordinating, but I don't miss the milestones that I missed in corporate. My daughter took her first steps at daycare, and that did something to me that I just will never forget. She was so stubborn. We took her to the beach to walk. We bought several pairs of different shoes to get her to walk. We bribed her with M&Ms. I saw her walk, but she just wouldn't take those independent steps. And one day I picked her up after work and she ran through the daycare doors and I was just crushed. What are you doing? She's still that kid at 9 who wants to defy norms, and that's good. She will need that, but I have to survive it first.
Isn't that interesting? Which seems to be, that small step was so monumental for you because it was that change in your daughter's life from a baby to a toddler.
Yeah. And also traveling, I never stepped on a plane and felt the same way again. It was actually pretty soul crushing. I was traveling a fair bit, maybe about once a month in the early years. And it's just every time that plane took off, if she wasn't with me, I was just sick. I hated it. I just could not wait until I was back on the ground and I knew everything was going to be okay. And I was with my family. And so that, while I thought motherhood wouldn't change me, and I thought I would continue working at the same pace and traveling, and we can laugh about that now, it was very naive. There's a lot of psychological change that happens that really is beyond what we can control. And so you see new moms get that new mom glow and you're like, oh, and then I was like, oh no, it's happening to me. I never want to go back to work. I made this bad joke early that I would live in a cardboard box and hope that my husband would still love me.
But we can never anticipate though, can we? What is going to happen? And as much as we know, it might not be the same for the next person. But I remember thinking, I lost my edge. I lost my edge in motherhood, and I didn't gain it back until my kids were a lot older. And
so you did get it back. That's reassuring.
I did.
Okay.
As what I say now, I'm 66 and I'm just getting started.
Oh my gosh, you look fabulous. First of all, when we get off of this podcast, I'm going to have to find out the name of whoever's giving you the moisturizer they're giving you, and then make a trip to Canada.
Very good. You're very good. So it's different. It's the same probably for you. You love the different stages, and I love my recruitment business too. This is just different. It's just a different phase. Share please, like how do you do it all as again as a mom? So now you're an entrepreneur. You're still being pulled because now you may not have one boss. You probably have many people, all your clients. So how do you manage all that and have in relationship? What are some secrets that you can share?
It's been messy. It's been imperfect. I think as women, we have to advocate for our needs better. I think historically we haven't done that. So I think part of it is good communication and knowing yourself, having like acute self-awareness of, like, I've done the stay-at-home mom thing. I've worked full-time with my business. I've worked part-time with my business. I've been full-time in my business and part-time, with the kids. And so of all those what roles I've played, I've never felt more balanced personally than when I'm working my business part-time and with the kids part-time. That has felt like a really good balance to me. So I think like having childcare, having dedicated work time is really, really important because we're still who we are as ambitious women, even in motherhood. And I think to continue that stay-at-home mom path would have not been good for my children or myself. I think that ambitious side that so many women take a break from and temper and leave the workforce for children, I think is really detrimental to their self-worth, financial stability, the options they have in marriage and outside of marriage. So I think a lot of it is just really acute self-awareness and being able to constantly advocate for your needs so that you can advocate for your children and their needs.
And be that role model.
Yes.
So so you left the corporate world and then you created a marketing company called More Meaningful Marketing. So what led you to that? Can you sort of share your journey, please?
Yes. So I spent most of my career, like I said, in male-dominated industries. So robotics, construction, manufacturing, power generation. So,
my goodness.
Engineering. I followed the money, to be honest with you. Marketing wasn't super lucrative at the time. Now we're in a digital age. It's a lot different.
Yes.
But I followed the money. I was getting divorced. I was like, I have to bounce back from this. Let's go down this path. And what I realized is the B2B world, as much as I liked it, I was still lacking like that B2C, really thoughtful, meaningful marketing that makes an impact. When corporate, there's just so many layers that impact may never be seen or felt. And I had a lot of ideas and not able to execute from A to Z. And so when I ended up getting fired, my daughter was very sick young. She had colic, reflux, asthma young. She had a milk allergy. And so not only was I adjusting to new motherhood, I was in a position that didn't have a lot of flexibility and felt pulled to be with her. Children just want their moms when they're sick. And like I had a very hard time separating myself from her when she needed me. And so I involuntarily left, and I just thought like, okay, this is really bad. And I wallowed for a while because I had worked so hard to get to where I was. And then I just thought, I already have this business for about a year, and maybe now is the time to try to build it and see where it can go. And so I did it, and I did it with this office that you see was my original nursery room, and it had Lego tables and it had coloring books on the floor. And my daughter now has picked the color on the wall. And so it's kind of evolved through the years, but, it hasn't been perfect. I think it's just been a matter of continuing to choose it on the hard days.
Really? And so what does keep you going?
Honestly, it is the balance and the impact. I would say like my mom worked 2 and 3 jobs. And I always say like if she had been given the opportunity to have what I had, she would have taken it in a heartbeat. And I think part of that is just trying to show appreciation for her and the way that she experienced motherhood by doing it in a way that I know benefits our family as a whole and what I know she wished that she could have done.
And if you were to compare and contrast, your mom did 3 jobs, so probably was away from the family a lot. Is that, what would you say were the big differences?
Yeah, away from the family a lot, not a lot of family meals or gatherings, certainly financial difficulties. I paid my way through school with my own, for my own education. And so really just trying to take all the things that she's instilled in me and, keep the good and take what I've learned to create a better future for my family.
Yeah. So, okay. And so when you think of your company, More Meaningful Marketing, how are you, you making an impact from what you do?
Yeah, I think it's a deep-seated, like some of it's probably what a therapist would call like a trauma response when I really think about it, because there's so much of what I do that just encourages women to show up and stand out thoughtfully online by being who they truly are. There's no more hiding motherhood. There's no more taking perfectly curated photos and, making everything perfect in the background. Like, I think that women are so afraid to be who they are because they're afraid to be perceived as weak, or they're not sure how a personal brand can amplify their marketing efforts. And so there's a lot for women of playing small because they lack confidence. And a lot of our confidence comes from doing and then being. And so it's really interesting that when we kind of step into our like God-given power, abilities, or, how we're meant to show up, how much like magic can happen. And so the impact is really the women who need permission to show up and play all in. And so it's very cool to kind of see that evolution and the momentum they can get when they have somebody who gives them that sigh of relief kind of publicly. So,
yeah, well, that's so interesting. So what you're saying, then your experience is actually your expertise. So
totally.
So when you think about your experience with your mom, if I were just to connect the dots here, so you watched your mom go through difficult times and how you experienced that as a daughter. And then you also were in the corporate world in a male-driven world, and the experience that you felt and the pain you felt from that. So when you say it's trauma-driven, and then probably marriage and divorce and all that sort of stuff, doesn't help all that together has brought you to this place.
Yes, totally. And what I will add that I didn't say before is that while I worked in a male-dominated industry, I was fired by a woman who was also a mom. And so that put me into this tailspin of just like, and when I look back on it, I always say like I was fired for prioritizing motherhood. And I think that's true with the way it unfolded. But I also think like the way we adapt as new moms, is messy and imperfect, and we're sleep deprived, and there's no grace in that.
Right. Yeah. Is there no grace in it? There's a lot of humility in it, isn't there?
Yes.
Like a lot of humility. Oh boy. I hope there's grace in it. But
I think in the corporate landscape, we say in our house, like patience and grace are what we give when we love someone, including ourselves. And I feel like, I just repeat it because I need it so desperately. And I really long for the days. And I think we're getting there, that women are more graceful with themselves. And then, in turn, that corporate extends that grace when those imperfect moments happen.
Yeah. And isn't it amazing too, those imperfect moments and that adversity that you had to endure really put you on the right track that feeds your soul and your purpose.
Absolutely. I mean, I would be caught saying like what I thought was my biggest burden became my biggest blessing. And it took some time. Of course, it was not beautiful the whole way through. But if I could, I wouldn't have imagined this was on the other side of all that kind of fighting in those early days to make this work. And so I'm just really grateful.
What did you learn about yourself in the process?
I think that there are a lot of other women and moms who kind of feel, and I won't say all, or just there's a population, and it could be smaller than I think, but that women should be staying at home if they have the opportunity. And if financially they're able, that's something they should want. And what I learned about myself is that, being career driven for so long, having, schedule on my terms created some rigidity within me of wanting some sameness, even in motherhood, of being able to travel. And so now the kids come, and sometimes that's been frowned upon. We took a nanny out west and went to Red Rocks and caught a show and did some hiking out there. And you get a lot of those, like, it must be nice to be able to do that. And, it's not without sacrifice. So I think that it's like sometimes the other women and moms who can create this almost illusion that self-fulfillment has to come second. And so one of the reasons I say this is that my mom got braces in her 50s, and I never knew my mom's teeth bothered her. Like, she was so busy sacrificing for us that she never did that for herself. And there was like a big aha moment of just like, wow, this like, it's in us to just sacrifice ad nauseum, right? And just stuff away our needs and push them down, and the kids come first and the marriage can wait. And we shouldn't have self-care if we can't afford to have whatever fill in the blank. And so I think we create moms who are really burnout. And I think we're really a first generation of listening to maybe our heart and soul a little bit about what balance looks like for us individually. And so I would say that's my biggest learning curve. And I will say it changes a lot. So when I made the choice to be home and to create and work this business, my daughter wanted me all the time. And then they turn a corner and they really want friends and school. And then so you look at that and you say, okay, now I have to adjust again, because what I thought this would look like is me being available all the time has now been met with some resistance. And so as the kids change, knowing what your new balance, looks like, and every year is different.
Yes. Yeah. And every week is different, really, isn't it? As an entrepreneur.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And what I enjoy too, when I look at your website, is that you have incorporated your daughter up to this point into it, and probably your son too, going forward when he gets a little bit older. But your daughter, and you've created 2 coloring books with your daughter. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I actually have one sitting here was the proof that we did together, but it's meaningful ways to spend time screen-free as a family. And so we did this, and we did a Christmas version, but it's really just been a way for us to spend that time together. She's very creative, and so I find that sometimes there isn't the right amount of support for creatives, and it's kind of, there's this starving artist mentality around whether it's a viable way to earn income. And so I kept seeing that in her the same way I saw it in me. And I was like, what can we do together? And through the pandemic, we became such a coloring family. We all had these adult coloring books. And I was like, wow, this is way more enjoyable than I thought. And so we just started to think about how, personally for me, it's just how many times I'm saying yes to screens because I'm tired, lost for inspiration, not sure what to do with the time when the days are monotonous. And so, we are in a generation where our kids are growing up with devices. And so how do we get a little bit more of that togetherness and connectedness back without falling behind in technology? And so that really is what inspired the book, is that my daughter will be like, let's build a fort. I'm too tired to build a fort. I don't want to build a fort. I'm so tired. We just built a fort yesterday and it wasn't what you wanted and it caused And so the book is not only a coloring book, at least our original one, not the Christmas one. It gives you ideas along with the pictures. So it's you can color the page that says build a fort, and then below it, and let's see if I can find it, because I think it's one of the first pages. I'll show you.
And it'll just as you look, just as you're looking at it, and so it was your daughter's. Oh, I see. And did you guys collaboratively come up with the ideas and then create the pictures to represent? Yeah, we what's really interesting is I have this calendar sitting right here, and we created a calendar during COVID of a whole month's worth of things we could do instead of devices. So it's take a walk, do a breathing exercise, play a game, do a puzzle. And so we started to talk through those. And so when we did the build a fort page, it's okay, well, now what can we do to make it a little more creative? And so then it's okay, we'll require a secret password and label the rooms, create pictures and label the rooms. And so it became this way of not only coloring if you want to do that together, but also just being able to say yes because the guesswork is gone. We don't need one more decision as moms. This takes the guesswork out. It makes us feel less guilty about using the screens. When you're lost for inspiration, you can page through and find some really simple ways to just kind of be together. Oh, and that's great. And how receptive was your daughter to this whole time with you? Can you just sort of share a story that you can think of that you and your daughter shared that would be an inspiration for other parents?
Yeah, so it's funny because perception versus reality always in motherhood.
Yeah.
She wanted to book a time on my calendar. That was really exciting to her that she could. And so that kind of started this. And we said, okay, well, if we do a recurring meeting for every Saturday from noon to 3, then we'll pick a place to have the meeting. She can pick it. And so she picked for our first one a small coffee shop that I work at on Mondays. And so we rented the conference room there, and we got our little drinks and our food, and we worked through lunch. And so we used AI for a lot of the coloring book, and we just used prompts. And so every Saturday for a few Saturdays, we met and did this, and she got sick of it rather quickly.
Oh.
She realized how much work was involved. So I would say the first 2 weeks started out really strong. She was very excited. But like the longer, we had a launch squad and all this marketing, of course, that we did with it. And she was just like, I just want to get it over with.
That's so funny.
So, I think, yeah.
Self was a great lesson. That these things don't come often easily. And it does take work and it does take time and commitment. So that's a great life lesson that your daughter was taught probably unknowingly.
Yeah. And I will say, like, she did start to look forward to it so much that, like, when she was being like unkind or we were having like behavioral issues, that I said, okay, well, we're not going to go pick a place that you want this week. We'll still do the book, but we're going to do it at home in the office. And so it became almost like, something that she was looking forward to, but also something that could get taken away if there was like a lack of respect or kindness or cooperation. It wasn't like holding it over her head. It was like, wow, this is something she really wants to do. And it is a special thing that we're doing together. And something that I felt like if we were like having that closeness together, that we should both be enjoying the time. I didn't want it to be like, oh, we're going again, and mom's mad at me, it really needed to be like really as good as it could be in the season we're in.
Yeah.
You have that experience.
But that was a great balance that you did, though, because you said we're still doing the work because we made that commitment, but we're doing it here and it's not going to be as much fun because we're not going to be able to new sort of fun environment, and it's not going to be just the two of us. Your brother could come in at any time.
Yeah.
So it's quite different. Yeah. Yeah. Oh.
And I'll say it was more than I thought too. I was sick of it myself by like the 5th week that we were doing it, and I'm doing a launch page and people are opting in, and don't forget to post. And this is in addition to like the agency work and everything else I'm doing. It's like an extra project, And so it was kind of cute. Like we took some pictures on our outings and she got to see the emails, and we kind of signed them like Mommy and Mallory. And so she was very involved. But there was a point where we were both just like, even when you use AI, sometimes it's more work because you have to be able to discern, is it like on strategy? Is it, so.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a great story. Thank you for sharing that, Tiffany.
Yes.
So knowing what you know now as a parent, as an entrepreneur, what would you do the same and what would you do differently?
I think I would definitely listen to myself a little more. I think as entrepreneurs, there's so much information out there about what people have tried that's worked, what hasn't. We start to like kind of take that on and think, well, if it wasn't possible for them, then it's not possible for me. Can I really work this business part-time and make full-time money? Can I find clients? And so I think I would have listened to my gut a little bit more. I made some bad partnership decisions early with people who weren't actually aligned with the kind of meaningful work I wanted to do. There are a lot of people who just want to make money. And so I think like listening to my gut more than research, I think would have served me a lot better and maybe provided less detours.
Interesting.
And what I would do the same would be to listen to my version of balance, because it's been different the entire time. We've switched days that the kids had child care. We've switched frequency. We've explored different avenues for the kids being taken care of inside and outside of the home, and just really being able to embrace each season and kind of listen to what you think the family needs. I never thought we'd have a nanny. And in fact, what I didn't mention is that I went back to corporate briefly with my second, because I was like, oh no, it's been me this whole time. And that means me +2 also, and running this company. And I started to want to make sure that I could afford a nanny in the house, because I couldn't imagine sending that little baby out into the daycare world. And so
yes,
I quickly realized that I needed that adult break, the interaction, the reassurance that I was on the right path with trends and my gut and my instincts. And then we afforded the nanny for 2 years, and I was in corporate for a year. And then I was on my own for a year, and then I helped her start her own business, and now she's off doing her cleaning business. And so it's just kind of funny how I think that I really had to listen to my gut in that moment. And I think that like it was the right decision then. So it's a little bit of what you've asked all in one, is like I would keep listening to myself, and then I would also be willing to be flexible and pivot, because it's not just me.
Yes. That's wow. So that has been quite a journey for you.
So I say corporate.
That has been an evolution. You're right. Yeah. And when you were in the corporate world the second time, how did that feel, having known what it was like to be at home as an entrepreneur?
You know what? It was like difficult at first because you have the luxury of time on your side and you get to spend it how you want to. So that was a little bit difficult. Having some distance from the kids, I think, was actually good for me personally because I was so in it. We were in a pandemic. It was nothing of like what I thought it was going to be. I wasn't going to the zoo. I wasn't doing the room mom thing. Daycares were closed down. Schools were different. And so what I thought that was going to look like didn't look that way. And it was nothing that I could have controlled. I just wasn't enjoying it.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and the pandemic on top of it must have just added a whole nother level of confusion and challenges.
Yeah, totally. And, you know, when I went back, I will say I had one of the most flexible jobs I could have hoped for, but it was full time.
Yes.
I was still missing time. And actually, I ended up with a boss who I knew from a previous position, like 10 years earlier. He became my boss and he was wonderful. And he was killed in a car accident, he and his wife.
Oh, my goodness.
Going to like the second leg of their vacation. But what I realized, and one of the last things we talked about, is if you're not good at home, you're not going to be good at work. And so at that time, I was really weighing my options of what more flexibility would look like versus salary and things like that. And then I just thought, you know, I had to find out about that on the same Zoom call as everyone else, as my team. And so that's where corporate, I think, has really fallen short for me as an individual, is like that just being a number mentality. Like I was pretty devastated that was how that went. We had a team of 4 or 5, remote work, small, tight-knit group. And so to find out that way, I just thought like the human element is very far removed.
Yeah, because as soon as you stop Zoom or whatever, then you're by yourself in your grief. Oh, that must have been very difficult. Very, very difficult. Because as humans, we still need to connect. We still need that.
Yes.
Being able to interact with one another.
Yeah, and I think some things like that little bit of loyalty, right? Like, I mean, I wouldn't have said anything. It would have been great to have a heads up. He was a friend of mine. And so that was just a little eye-opening. And then I just thought, like, I'm missing time for a job that thought that was okay.
Yeah, yeah. So then that also another traumatic event that led you to where you are today.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, a lot of things will happen for a reason. I think if we lean into our purpose and what we really are being honest with ourselves about what we want and need and desire for our families and their futures, I think it's just a really, as often as we can do it, a gut check.
Yeah. And listening to the messages. Don't you find there's messages all around us. They're there if we're open and willing to listen.
Yeah, that's so true.
Tiffany, thank you very much for sharing all about very transparent and authentic information. I mean, you certainly embody what you're doing out in the world.
Thank you so much.
We just met, and I feel like I already know you because you were willing to share so authentically. So thank you for that. And may I ask you a couple of questions off of my Now You're Talking board game?
Yes, let's do it. I'm excited.
Okay, because I am so interested to hear this because you talked about your mom and how your mom has been such an impact in your life. And how has your birth order in your family contributed to who you are?
Well, you've probably guessed by this interview that I'm the oldest child of 3. I think I'm characteristically and shamelessly an oldest child.
You're driven for sure.
Yeah, so I think that I grew up with my mom. So my mom was a young mom at 18. She was married young. And so, that was the reverse of what I've had, where I kind of created my life and financial footing ahead of having children. I had her as the example of just like watching her grow and learn. And I think we forget as parents, like this is the first time we've ever done this too. And we're learning for our entire lives. We put so much weight into our parents having it all figured out. And in fact, my daughter said the other day, I was like, I really don't know what I'm doing sometimes. I was like apologizing for something I did. And she said, how do you not know what you're doing yet? I've been here for a long time. I just turned 9. And I said, wow, nothing like adding salt to that.
Yeah, that's so funny.
She's not wrong. It is a chunk of time, but...
Yeah. Isn't that funny though? Because it's not until our kids get older and they become kids, they go, whoa, our parents really were probably flying by the seat of their pants like they are right this moment.
My poor mom, to have waited so long for me to follow in similar, a journey as a mom, she just kept saying, I can't wait till you're a mom. You're going to appreciate me so much more. Mom, stop. I appreciate you plenty. Well, every day it grows. Truly.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Can you describe, please, Tiffany, a high point in your high school life?
Oh, in my high school life, I was someone who really enjoyed English. I loved old literature. I have the Great Gatsby book here in the corner. I've got an F. Scott Fitzgerald quote. And so I think that really shaped, what I wanted in my future was having a really great English teacher, really being driven to be the first in my family to graduate with a 4-year degree and taking classes that really inspired me to do that. And so I left home at 18. I was very young. That was really to my own detriment. I mean, I think that goes without saying that I thought I would know what life was all about by then, but I think it taught me some really valuable lessons. And I continued to go on to college, living away from home and fully paying for it. So I think like a lot of those teachers and mentors and advocates and also having like a self, knowing that I could do it really served me well from a young age. And to have left that marriage so early in my 20s, like there was a lot to be said about just being, strong-willed early, but kind of sneaking in high school.
Oh, really? It did. Because 18, you were just finishing your high school. Boy, you didn't have a lot of life experience to have the courage to do what you did.
So I would say that was definitely like the momentum I had there definitely prepared me.
Yes. And so that says to me, you've always had within you that entrepreneurial spirit.
I think so. I mean, now that I look back, it's very obvious. And my sister and my mom, like, we both know that, like, you don't like authority that much, but we just don't talk about it. So it's just so funny. And it's not, I think it's not all that, but it's just funny that that's their interpretation of what an entrepreneur is. It's half true, of course.
Well, yeah, because the school system molds us to be one way.
Yes.
Often the entrepreneurs don't fit that mold. So
always going to rain in most situations. Yes. The path of most resistance always was me.
Exactly. That makes a lot of sense. So I'll just ask a couple more questions. If your dreams did come true, where would you be and what would you be doing?
I love that question. So I was the woman who I said would have quit my corporate job before I would be a public speaker. I was prepared to quit my great paying job because I was slated to speak at a conference the following year. I was on a short list of people who might have to. And I swore that I was going to quit because I would be shaking in group settings and I would be so afraid of even small introductions for no reason other than judgment, lack of confidence, just feeling behind all the time, incapable. So now I do public speak, and obviously we're talking in a public way here. And so I think I would want to share this story a little more broadly. And so if that meant stages or more podcasts, or just so that I could teach someone that really stepping into themselves is the right way to go. I think we're so conditioned and apprehensive as we're learning and growing to really listen to our hearts and our needs. But I think as we grow, we always know.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. So what shifted for you from then and now?
I think it was really losing my job and, really feeling the way that women weren't nurtured the way that I felt like I would want to nurture, be a safe space for other women, other moms, the work. And so just knowing that I can be trusted as an individual without having to worry about a bad seed spoiling the bunch, right? Or just that toxicity that can easily leak in small groups or in corporate settings. I think having the control to work with really good people and being able to make those decisions and do those gut checks right along with my clients has been really a huge motivation.
Well, that's so interesting. So that leaving the corporate world has been pivotal for you in many ways, it seems.
I think it's because I never saw it coming for myself. Do you know what I mean? I was never really the woman who dreamed about a wedding or children or had it all. I was a planner, but that just never seemed to be part of my future. So seeing how motherhood it was really motherhood, I think, that was that pivotal moment. And then making choices to kind of continue to support that journey really let me lead into my true I think, calling and purpose.
Well, and you, in your business, you give other people a voice. So that's what you encourage people to go out there with their own unique voice out in the world in their own way. And give them the tools and the courage to do that.
Absolutely. It's such a blessing. Yeah. It's just so cool to like watch a woman kind of come in. It was my nanny came through my coaching program. I was like, just join us. Like, I know you're early in your journey, but I'm telling you, it's going to like change things. And the first time that she came into the Zoom, she's like, I don't really do Zoom meetings a lot. I clean houses and I really didn't even want to show up on camera. And, she was unpolished and authentic. Like, if I go off camera, it's just because I'm like, not sure how this, And then to watch her be like the star of the coaching program. I mean, at the end of it, she was building a website. She was doing virtual consults. She was hiring. She was getting shirts made. She was rebranding. It just was very cool to think about in a mere like 8 to 9 weeks that we worked together, that she just really blossomed in her ability to put herself first, listen to herself, be confident. It was really amazing to see that transformation. And I would say that's pretty typical, but to see a young person, college age, step into that earlier than I did, like that's...
Yes. Yeah. But isn't that incredible though? So you took your life experience and then shared it with her and helped her to sort of avoid some pitfalls that you...
Have an entrepreneurial mentor or person to aspire to. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
I was the first to go to college, and I'm also the first crazy one to do this and risky. And like, what is she doing? And so I think it's hard to find your people.
Right. Yeah. Especially if you don't come from that pond of people. I find that people can they unknowingly will pull us back because...
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'll share my mom. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of my mom, but I put a video out. This was like kind of my I'm going to be a public speaker and like tell my story and not be afraid. So I created a video and I'll send it to you of my daughter and my husband and I and how we built, what we have and what that looks like and how I got fired. And my mom said when she watched it, what happens if you need a real job again someday? And like, she didn't mean to deter me.
Yeah.
I bet you that every entrepreneur has heard that in some capacity, like your 401k, your retirement, social, but it's just kind of funny that like that bruised me for a minute. And then, but knowing me, I was like, you know what? No, now I'm really going to do it.
Yeah.
I'm putting it out right now.
Right. Oh boy. Yeah. Well, good for you. That's great because it's hard, especially when stuff like that comes from our moms.
Well, we want to be safe and we want to protect our kids. And that is scary. Now that I'm a mom, I'm like, that probably is scary as a parent.
Yes. Yeah. And probably more about your mom than it is about you. It's something that somebody said to your mom and so it's always that ripple effect, but being able to unravel that really, really helps in order to go forward. Words of wisdom, Tiffany, but words of wisdom for other entrepreneurs, for other parents trying to navigate the digital world. What are some words of wisdom that you can share?
Yeah, I think like maybe less digital and more just tactical would be, I think so many of us when we have a side hustle think that we have to replace our corporate salary because we're living to those means. And so to me, that felt like big shoes to fill until I didn't have a choice. And I always said, like, I can do it without a backup plan. And then like, no preparing, you can do it too. But I think that's such a myth that you have to replace the corporate salary. You really have to think about, especially if you're a mom, how much childcare do you need? How much can you afford? Do you need it at all? Do you have family who can jump in and help you? Are you willing to forego the Target trips and Starbucks runs just for a little while? And thinking about what that short-term sacrifice looks like for you. And the business has benefits such as tax deduction that we're not really thinking about when we're in a corporate role. Just there's so many incentives that can make it work that I think it's not as scary as it seems once you have that right educational foundation. But then I'll say, for moms in business or women in business that are getting into the online space, it can feel super scary. Even being a marketer, I was telling people to show up on camera, but I wasn't doing it. I was just like, you need to do that because it works, but I'm not going to do it because I don't want to.
Yes.
And then I started to do like a series of marketing Mondays. And so every week I did it with makeup, without makeup. I hid from my daughter once under my bed to get one done. And she was in them sometimes, and there were bloopers, but I did it every week consistently. And then that fear, it went away. And so I actually have a visibility guide too that I think it's 54 pages or so of just like helping women to like show up, journal, talk about their unique attributes and not to look at them like they're going to be compared, rejected, judged. I think that's such a hard hurdle to overcome, but that once you do it and get comfortable doing it imperfectly, it's very, very much more simple than we make it.
Yes. Well, that's your own inspiration. Because it can be really scary. So by the fact that you're doing it and you push through a lot of your fears to make it happen, you're an inspiration for others to do the same. So,
thank you. And I didn't want to do it. Sometimes it's still hard. I still don't want to do it, but I do. But I'm not going to act like it still doesn't come with days where I don't feel like doing my hair but yeah, all for the cause.
Tiffany, thank you very much for being so authentic and real and for showing up, being all that you are.
Thank you so much. And
this conversation with Tiffany is a reminder that balance isn't something we stumble into. It's something we choose again and again with awareness and courage. What stood out most was Tiffany's willingness to name the imperfect moments, the burnout, the grief, the pivots, while holding a firm belief that work should support our lives, not consume them. Her story invites us to ask, who are we beyond our roles? What do we need to advocate for at work, at home, and within ourselves? And what might change if we extended more grace to ourselves and to each other? Thank you for listening and being part of conversations that matter. Until next time, keep showing up, keep listening, and keep choosing what feels true for you. You've been listening to Now You're Talking. Parenting with a busy career while guiding kids through the lure of screens isn't easy, but meaningful connection is always worth it. Take a moment to start a conversation with someone you care about. It could be the highlight of their day. Until next time, let the conversations begin. Now You're Talking.
I'm Michelle Abraham, and we are honored to have Adrienne Giffen's Now You're Talking podcast on our High Vibe Podcast Network. For more high vibe shows like hers, head on over to highvibepodcastnetwork.com and grab your free gift from our gift vault from all of our hosts. Until then, stay high vibe.